So everybody's been asking me what omnigender means, and I'm just going to tell you that it means I'm a woman all of the time, and sometimes I'm also a man.
Can't trust a child to know themselves and their body.
Therefore, I propose that all children be put on puberty blockers.
Floret and gender fay are pretty similar, where gender fay is gender fluid between agender identities and female.
Hey everybody, I'm Brad Polumbo, and welcome back to the Damage Control Podcast, where we're reclaiming the debate over LGBT issues from the crazy people who've taken it over. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and don't forget to hit that like button as we go along. If you're watching us on YouTube, do leave a comment with your thoughts. I do take the time to read the comments most of the time. Today we're going to do a deep dive on California's new law attacking parental rights and pushing gender madness. And as always, I'll react to some crazy LGBT TikToks for your viewing pleasure as I lose brain cells. Let's get into it. So up first, there's been quite the stir after California Governor Gavin Newsom recently signed into law a new bill prohibiting schools from having a parental notification policy requiring that parents be notified if their student, their child, starts transitioning their gender or going by a different name or pronouns at schools. Well, that won't be allowed. Any sort of policy requiring parents being notified of such an important change in their child's life under a new law that California just signed. Let's go to NBC's Bay Area local affiliate for some coverage.
Yesterday, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill that will stop schools from notifying parents if a student changes their gender identity in class. The new law won't go into effect until next year, but it's already triggering everything from cheers to threats. Here's NBC Bay Area's Marianne Favreau.
The new law will stop California public schools from notifying parents if a student starts using different pronouns or identifies as a different gender than what's in school records. State Assembly member Lori Wilson welcomes the new law.
This is extremely important because, as most people know, I have a transgender son who actually was transitioning while in high school. And although we as a family knew generally that he was struggling with his identity, we did not know that at school he was going by a different name. And it was actually a teacher who first told us.
She says she was disappointed the teacher had betrayed her child's trust. State Assembly member Christopher Ward authored the bill.
It is very invasive when you are coming out. You want to be in control of your information and not have that shared by outside actors, and particularly other government actors like school officials.
But today, those who oppose the law say the state will now pay a price, including Elon Musk, who posted on X that he is moving two of his company's headquarters out of the state, saying because of this law and the many others that preceded it attacking both families and companies, SpaceX will now move its headquarters from Hawthorne, California to Starbase, Texas, and then posting that X headquarters will move to Austin.
I think it's a farce to say that it had to do with this legislation. He's been planning that for a very long time, and I think that it's unfortunate that he, as an entrepreneurial leader, chooses to use his platform and his voice to continue to spread hate and to be divisive.
Musk isn't the only opponent. The president of the Liberty Justice Center says his legal team now plans to fight the new law in court.
Parents absolutely have a right to know that information. Parents have a right to direct the upbringing of their children, and they don't give that right up just because they send their children to a public school.
There's a lot there, and I'm going to give you my take on all of it. But first, I want to offer some more context from a really interesting piece in The Free Press by Abigail Schreier. She writes that in California, instruction in sexual orientation and gender identity has been mandatory for all public students K through 12 since the passage of the Healthy Youth Act in 2016. Because such instruction typically occurs within the required anti-bullying curriculum, rather than the sex education curriculum, parents cannot elect that their children opt out of what is, in practice, a full-bore indoctrination into gender ideology. So not only will parents in many school districts not need to be notified if their student transitions, gender ideology and all the different pronouns and that kind of stuff is being taught to them in a class that is not even an option to opt out of. Schreier continues, when a child then predictably decides in class that she too may be non-binary or transgender, this revelation will often trigger school's gender support plan, effectively a school-wide conspiracy to promote the child's new name and gender identity without tipping off mom and dad. Official documents and emails and report cards are sent to parents to preserve the child's birth name and pronouns, concealing the social transition from parents. Schreier continues, I have talked to parents who discovered their middle school daughters had spent the better part of an entire academic year known to the entire school as Spencer or Ethan. One of these girls had even roomed with the boys on an overnight school trip, all without the parents actually knowing. To me, this is absolutely insane. Schools should be allowed to, and frankly should, have parental notification policies that if a student begins identifying as transgender or going by a different name or pronouns, parents should absolutely be brought into the loop. Because what you're essentially discussing is a child experiencing a form of psychological distress, gender dysphoria, which is a mental health condition linked to serious outcomes like anxiety, depression, and unfortunately, often suicide attempts. So the idea that the parents who are ultimately responsible for their child's well-being and safety wouldn't immediately be informed of such a development is absolutely bat. Now, advocates of this cite two things. They say, well, there shouldn't be forced outing, and they compare it to sexual orientation, to which this law also applies. But gender identity and sexual orientation are not the same thing. I do agree that there is no need for parents to be notified if the teachers perceive something about a student's sexual orientation or if a student comes out or anything like that. That's, to me, entirely separate than gender identity issues. Gender identity issues are inextricably linked with mental health conditions. This is just the nature of gender dysphoria. Any actual transsexual or transgender person will tell you that. They didn't transition just because they felt like it. It wasn't for fun. It wasn't for shits and giggles. It was because, often from a very early age, they experienced intense mental health issues associated with their biological sex. So parents, as the ultimate guardians of these kids, the people tasked with their well-being and safety, need to know if their kid is experiencing mental distress so they can get them the help they need. Now, advocates of these laws cite the threat of abuse or abandonment, but I think that's a tiny minority of cases. Now, I do think parental notification policies could have an exception if a counselor or somebody involved in the school has good reason to believe that if the parents are notified, the child will be thrown out of their home and become homeless or would be subject to physical abuse or something like that. I'd be totally open to these policies having some sort of narrow exception for when there are credible fears of abuse. But if that's the situation, I mean, child services should already be involved because it's clearly not a safe home for the child. And again, that's a tiny, tiny minority of cases. Most Americans would not abuse or disown or kick out their child just because they were having gender identity issues. And any who would, to be clear, are pretty evil in my book. You cannot come between, especially as a government public institution, you cannot come between parents and their kids. This is one of the most fundamental and sacred ties and bonds in human existence. Very few things are more important to people than their kids, and messing with their kids is a disastrous idea for your movement. Now, this policy from Gavin Newsom in California is also potentially illegal, and they've already been hit with a lawsuit over it from my friends over at the Liberty Justice Center, which is representing me in my case about TikTok. From their press release, today, the Liberty Justice Center filed a lawsuit to challenge the legislation and defend Californian parents' rights. The Liberty Justice Center's lawsuit, filed on behalf of the Chino Valley Unified School District and several Californian parents with children in the state's public school system, asks the court to bar California from implementing AB 1955 because the legislation violates the First and 14th Amendments, as well as the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Pre-K through 12 minor students, most of whom are too young to drive, vote, or provide medical consent for themselves, are also too young to make life-altering decisions about their express gender identity without their parents' knowledge. But that is precisely what AB 1955 enables, with potentially devastating consequences for children too young to fully comprehend them, said Emily Ray, senior counsel at the Liberty Justice Center. School officials do not have the right to keep secrets from parents, but parents do have a constitutional right to know what their minor children are doing at school. Parents are the legal guardians of their children, not Governor Newsom, Attorney General Bonta, or Superintendent Thurmond. We will continue to defend parents' rights and children's well-being by challenging invasive laws like AB 195 in court. I'm glad this is being challenged in court, but admittedly, I don't know the ins and outs of the constitutionality or legality of this policy. What I do know for certain is that it's a terrible idea on its own merits, and as a simple matter of political strategy. The LGBT community is in a massive time of backlash and a time of small but significant decreases in support in public opinion. Yet the solution to this, the hill that trans activists and LGBT activists are going to die on, is coming between kids and their parents. You've got to be kidding me. I literally cannot imagine a better way to take public support for the LGBT community and light it on fire, set it plummeting into depths we haven't seen in decades, than to undermine parental rights and to start pushing gender stuff on kids and then not even letting the parents know what is going on. This is totally different than let us live our lives in peace. This is totally different than let us get married. This is totally different than let adults get surgeries or do whatever they want with their own bodies. This is you undermining people's knowledge and control over their children's fundamental well-being and development. That's nuts. And there's nothing, and I genuinely mean nothing, that I can think of better suited to piss normal people off and turn them against the entire LGBT community than this. So great job, California and Democrats and LGBT activists. You're doing amazing. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments of this crazy policy, and am I missing something? Honestly, let me know, because it just seems absolutely bat to me. All right, guys, now it's time for everybody's favorite part of the podcast, where I react to LGBT TikToks and lose brain cells for your entertainment pleasure. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube if you aren't yet. Don't forget to hit that like button as we go along, yada, yada, yada. And now, let's get into it. Up first, this TikToker wants us to know what omnigender means.
Hey cutie, so everybody's been asking me what omnigender means, and I'm just gonna tell you that it means I'm a woman all of the time, and sometimes I'm also a man. I used to identify as a gender-fluid trans woman, but then I realized that I am never not a woman, and the idea of people denying my femininity always makes me upset. But sometimes people denying my masculinity makes me upset. Sometimes I genuinely need both, okay? I don't always need masculinity. I am much more feminine than I am masculine, and I prefer to be feminine. But I do need both to be fulfilled. And so I choose the word omnigender just because I like it more than pangender, honestly. And that's just a personal choice. If you like pangender and identify as pangender, good for you, more power to you. But I identify as omnigender.
I've seen this video at least 5 times, and I still have no idea what the this person just said. I will just point out that once again, Brad's rule that when you see one of those bull-looking ass nose rings, you're 99% chance about to see the worst take of your life, my rule stays undefeated. How can you be a woman and a man? What do these words or concepts even mean anymore in this person's imagination? If you can be simultaneously both feminine and masculine, how is that even possible? Don't those things directly contradict each other? Like, the math doesn't even math. It doesn't make any sense. And I will say that this, again, gets to my point of needing external validation, right? This person says, I do get really upset if people don't acknowledge my femininity and my masculinity. It's like, well, hold on there a second, right? You should be confident enough and strong in your own sense of self that you don't need people's affirmation, right? You're you, and who cares what people think? If your self-esteem is so heavily dependent on people validating a kind of, frankly, incoherent projection of your sense of self, then that is a recipe for disaster, for your own self-esteem, for your own mental health, for your own emotional well-being, because most people aren't going to validate something that doesn't make any sense, that's totally incoherent, that's not remotely rational or reasonable. So if you simultaneously are saying that your identity is this mixed bag of things that can't go together and actually mean what they're supposed to mean, but also that you're dependent on other people validating and affirming that for your well-being, well, that's a bad recipe there, my friend, because you're not going to get validated. You're going to get looks of, at best, confusion or eye rolls, and at worst, really negative responses. So people who find this very strange and unsettling, frankly. And I love how they always have to do this thing where they make up fake words for things that already have a label, like pangender already exists. Although, again, that's also incoherent. But this person has to come up with omnigender because they have to be special or different. And again, I just come back to the idea that a lot of this gender stuff is really just like them trying to substitute for a personality. I think that's what they really mean. I'll just say this. If I was an actual trans person, I would not be very happy about this being lumped in with my identity and my community. And even since I've somehow been roped into this stuff as part of an LGBT community, I'm not very happy about that. I mean, what is any of that? What does any of what we just watched have to do with me as a gay man? Me being gay? It's like, to me, it's not a Venn diagram. It's just two circles. They don't touch. But somehow I've been lumped in with this. So what amazing, amazing progress. Up next, this TikToker thinks all kids should be put on puberty blockers? You can't make this stuff up, guys. Take a listen.
Can't trust a child to know themselves and their body.
Therefore, I propose that all children be put on puberty blockers before they hit puberty.
If they're not trans, cool. They can get off puberty blockers and continue puberty as they were.
And if they are trans, then you just save them a lot of emotional pain from the secondary sex characteristics they have.
If you say that kids are too young to know whether or not they are trans, then that means that kids are too young to know whether or not they are cis. It's two sides of the same coin, baby. We can't trust any kids to make any decisions.
So I almost can't tell if this person actually means this as a position or if they're attempting to be facetious, to kind of satirize the normal take here, which is that kids can't decide their gender identity and consent to medically transitioning at prepubescent ages. That is the normal, reasonable take. And I think this person isn't actually suggesting that all kids be put on puberty blockers, which would just be insane. I mean, you don't put people on a medication and block the normal process of life for no reason, especially when those medications can have significant side effects, and they're actually only even prescribed off-label for this. This isn't even what they're approved for, this kind of gender treatment. Anyway, that would be absolutely nuts. But I think what this person is actually doing is trying to satirize it a little bit to make that second point, that, oh, well, you're saying kids can't understand if they're trans, then they can't understand if they're cis. But that's a totally, totally false dichotomy. To be cis, which is a weird word, it just is the default state of human existence. It is the absence of a unique and rare condition in which you experience intense distress associated with your biological sex. That would be like saying that we should assume all kids have a peanut allergy and just not give any kids peanut butter. Like, no. Rare situations will occur where some child has this unique experience and that we can address that on a case-by-case basis, but we shouldn't change the norm over incredibly rare statistical anomalies. And again, like, people like this, if I was a parent and I saw these kinds of activists coming across my timeline, I would be very alarmed and I would think, wow, this community is my enemy. And I can understand why people would feel that way, although I would want to stress to them that, please, not all of us are like this. In fact, I would say many, many are not. But this kind of thing is so aggressive and so abrasive and seems to be going after people's kids. And once again, there's literally no better way to turn support for the LGBT community on its head than to do this. So keep up the great work, sweetie. You're just doing amazing. Up next, this person identifies as gender fluid. Let's hear them out, I guess. Do we have to?
Hi everyone, my name is Bunny. I use bun pronouns. So continuing on the video talking about the gender fey identities, there's one called gender floret. So gender floret and gender fey are pretty similar, where gender fey is gender fluid between agender identities and female. Gender floret is gender fluid amongst different agender, neutroid identities with some feelings of femininity that can come in every now and then, but never fully identifying as female. That's what I've got for gender fluid. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Again, I'm sorry, but what the does bunny pronouns have to do with me as a gay man? Why am I being lumped in with this? And I don't mean this in a negative way. It just is what it is. Why am I being lumped in with this mental illness? This makes no sense at all. It's totally incoherent. Female is a biological sex. It is not something mutable. It is not something you can identify with or not. So the idea that you would sometimes identify as female, no, you're either always female or never female. You're not, there is no identifying as it. It is a biological sex categorization. Again, all of this feels like an attempt to conflate personality with demographics. It's okay to be a male who dresses goth and wears skirts and is feminine, or we're like, no skin off my back. You do you. If that will be cool, if that's what makes you feel cool, if that's what you like doing, all the power in the world to you to do that. But it doesn't make you some strange constellation of gender identities or anything like that. You're still just a male. That's okay. And we need to stop allowing absolutely incoherent nonsense to be lumped in with our community. Y'all, you know I don't support TikTok being banned, but I will say, if it does happen, that will be excellent news for the LGBT community. Because right now, they're just putting us on a slow motion train wreck towards backlash. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me on the Damage Control podcast, where we're reclaiming the debate over LGBT issues from the crazy people who've taken it over. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Take a second and comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, actually. I don't just say that. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, which remember you can do on those platforms or any podcast platform, just search Damage Control. Please do take a second to rate and review the show so we can grow. And with that, we'll talk again next week.